Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much for joining us for the Global Skills Spotlight. This is our forum to talk about issues in technical and vocational education and training, skills and employment. And we're really delighted to be talking to you today. Our question is, what should the College of the Future be? Which is few words, but contains a huge amount of complexity and is a really vital question for us to be dealing with at this moment in time. The colleges are responding to all sorts of different shocks, all sorts of different ambitions, all sorts of different challenges, and have really never been more important, I think, in their role and in their potential to catalyse building back better from COVID and the other challenges we face. I'm really delighted to be today to be joined by two people who will share their perspectives on what the College of the Future should be. Firstly, Leslie Giles, who is Director of Work Advance and a Commissioner for the Independent Commission on the College of the Future. Do you want to say hello, Leslie?
Hello.
Right. And secondly, we're really delighted to be joined by Dr. Bin, who is the Deputy Director General from the Directorate of Vocational Education and Training in Vietnam. Hello, Dr. Bin. Fabulous. So what we're going to do is just give them a short bit of time to set out their visions for what they think the College of the Future should be. But we really want to hear from you as well. We've got delegates from 20 countries around the world joining us today, and we know that it will mean something different to all of you. But I think we can really, over the course of the next hour, draw out some of the common challenges that we're facing, and we really want to hear your perspectives on what the College of the Future should be. So please do write in the comments, and if you have any questions for Leslie or for Dr. Bin, then please do share them, and we will get to them at the end. We're going to have both presentations, and then we will have questions at the end. So please do write your questions as they occur to you, and we'll loop back and get to them. So today we're asking what the College of the Future should be, and I think it's a really difficult thing to define. Colleges are a first choice and a second chance. They need to train to the highest standards, but leave no one behind. They need to behave as efficient private sector enterprises, but with a public emphasis. They need to train people for the most specific occupations, but give people broad skills that will get them through life as well as work. They need to innovate, but not fail. They need to respond to local needs, but play by national rules. They need to have the best teachers and the best resources, but they can't be too expensive. They need to consult widely with the community, but not lose their central purpose. They need to train for today and tomorrow. So that's a huge job for a college principal or chief executive to manage. How do you manage those competing things? Can you do everything? What should you prioritise? The Independent Commission on the College of the Future is a coalition of organisations in the UK who've been thinking about exactly this question, and Leslie is going to talk us through the work that they've been doing and she has been contributing to as a commissioner. So Leslie, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. What a fantastic opening, and with all of those big strategic questions, the big challenge I have initially is talking for only 10 minutes to try and answer them. But I know that we're going to have a rich debate, and I'm really excited by the fact that this is an international network. So I'm really kind of looking for insights and best practice from other countries to benefit the UK. But I'm delighted to be here at this Global Skills Spotlight and have the opportunity to talk about this really vital agenda that I'm absolutely passionate about. I've been delighted over the last 18 months to be a commissioner on this independent commission on the College of the Future. And in my 10 minutes, so I better hurry up, I was just going to say a little bit more about the commission and why it's so important. And then I'm going to give you a sense of some of the recommendations really we're setting out to enhance the role of colleges in the future and answer this question. And we have published a report, so you can actually download it and pour through the detail, given that I'll only be able to give it a kind of cursory account today. So the commission was set up, I've already hinted, 18 months ago, so it was spring last year, and it was set up by the Four Nations College Alliance, which is a community of college leaders and officials across the UK trying to advance conditions in further education and respond to a dynamic economy. It was absolutely vital to set it up because really what it did was recognise that we're going through these real changes around the future of work, and therefore colleges have to respond, because when you're working with internationally in this area, and I was struck by the OECD, who actually was one of the experts supporting the Commission, they actually said the real risk of education systems moving forward around the future of work is that they lose their currency and relevance because they don't adapt quickly enough. So this was the agenda that we wanted to embrace. You can see on my slides here, there were two questions we were trying to answer. What do we want and need from the College of the Future? And how really are we going to get there? So essentially that was the task. The other thing that was really vital in terms of 2019 was it was kind of a period that was really acknowledging the scale of turbulence, because if we looked back just in the prior 10 years to that, and I'll sort of illustrate it to kind of really hammer home the importance of this. We had gone through a global financial crisis in 2008 and a recession that followed. In UK, we'd made a decision to come out of Europe, so we actually had wrestling with Brexit, which has created additional economic turbulence. And then we've had a global pandemic with COVID-19 crisis. So these huge events creating almost this environment of normality, which is defined by disruption and uncertainty. And if we move to my next slide, the other challenge was this had really come, when we think about the future of work, this had really come on the back of decades of global forces for change, megatrends, driving changes in the structure of our economies and the composition of work and the skills that were required. And how will colleges, not on their own, but alongside other education providers as part of a system, going to be able to respond to these kinds of developments? And if I just illustrate a couple of them, you've got a rapid pace of globalisation, we've got opening up of international markets, rapid growth of developing economies, challenging developed economies like the UK. In the UK, we've had a productivity slowdown for the last decade, and a big element of that has been around a lack of skills investment. We've got falling investment in skills, but at the same time, we've got these technological advances, technological revolution, demanding more and more higher skills so that people can work effectively alongside machines and innovate machines and drive smarter working. So, you know, really, it's a case of trying to modernise learning methods and colleges responding to that agenda. So we identified that there were three probably strategic objectives that we wanted colleges to contribute to. One was to recognise the importance of lifelong learning and for colleges to empower people to continue to learn throughout their lives. The second issue was to work with businesses to enhance their innovation, their investment in technology and their investment in people so they could drive better productivity. And the third element, because college is at the heart of every community, it was a really key role that they had contributing to the connectivity of those community and a sense of belonging, a sense of place, enhancing and embedding education as part of a wider local offer of services. So this was the kind of challenge that we set out and we wanted to step forward with. I said earlier, we published a report last month, so we progressed for 18 months, talking really to a number of different stakeholders across the skills system, obviously focusing a lot on the FE sector itself, talking to leaders, talking to staff, talking to students, but we also want to talk to employers and government, policymakers and other providers to see how we could embrace this agenda. And we move to the next slide. I don't know how many of my remaining 10 minutes I have, but I'll quickly go through at a high level some of the things we said about the role for colleges and really how we were going to kind of deliver this new and exciting agenda with colleges. So there were 6 areas that we set out in the report. The report is not meant to be prescriptive guidance, it's meant to be a vision. It's building a shared agenda and consensus. And the first part of that consensus is around setting out the conditions for the system to operate as a system. So there's an invigorated role for colleges, but alongside other partners within an education system. And that's signified by having a national post-16 education and skills strategy launched by government. In the UK, that means we need 4 strategies for each government in the UK, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. And essentially what that does is give a signal to the importance of lifelong learning. So yes, government can make an important initial contribution before people leave the education system. They have an initial platform of skills, but then different providers have to work to support individuals to continue to learn throughout their lives. The second dimension then, if we're starting to set up the importance of a system, is to really strengthen the infrastructure locally for delivery partners to work together to really kind of work to that system, ensure that education is supplied throughout a lifetime. So that's about networks, it's about collaborations, it's about recognising that colleges need to work together with other education providers across a local area and understand the needs of that local area and respond to that local area. But it also means that they need to work with wider partners in that local area to actually ensure that education aligns with other services around employment, social inclusion, business support, public health, these wider issues. The third area is that we need to make sure that if we've got thriving communities in future that demand higher skills, that the education system is clear about what lifetime guarantee it gives of that initial platform of skills, and we're saying that should be level 3. But then we need to actually ensure that the system is working to supplement those skills over time. And there could be additional skills guarantees that have to be public funded to help those areas most at risk of industrial restructuring so that people can transition. Because some of these demands are really, really big in terms of the requirement here. I think the CBI initially said that something like 9 out of 10 people in the UK need to up their skills over the next 10 years, which is something like 26 million people. So it's really big agenda in here in terms of meeting this signalling this lifetime commitment, skills commitment. I think moving into the fourth area, it's about recognising and reinvigorating the relationships that colleges have locally with employers, but putting that on a stronger footing, both strategically, but also investing in the infrastructure too, and strengthening employer networks and in a system of employer hubs so that colleges can work effectively with employers to support co-investment and co-design in a relevant sort of set of curriculum and products that are going to meet their needs. We also need to see changes to our governance processes to give colleges the room to step up strategically, to collaborate, to review their curriculum, to invest for the future, to modernise their learning methods. And that means we've got to move to more mission-driven funding and outcome agreements with colleges, which are hopefully negotiated over a longer time frame, such as at least 3 years rather than an annual basis at the moment. And finally, referencing the last point that Andy was saying about making sure that we're working with college leaders to recognise, reward and develop the workforce so that they have the most world-class workforce to work in colleges moving forward. So that's the agenda we've set out. Clearly a long-term agenda, clearly something colleges can't do on their own, that they need to work in partnership, but that's the basis of the building blocks that we want to work with. So I'm sorry if I've overrun a little bit there, Andy, but I tried to cram it all into 10 minutes.
You haven't at all, and that was excellent. And I think you know, you could have done that in less time, Leslie. That was easily
I can work
possible.
up a bit faster.
While Dr. Bim prepares his presentation, I wondered if you could reflect a little more, Leslie, on the localism aspect of what you've been talking about, because I think what you're saying there is that this is a college and sector driven process, and they're seeking the room to create their own future in a way and define that themselves. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that probably is fair. I think that we've ended up, I mean, the complexity of this is that, you know, I was talking about that sort of recent horizon over the last 10 years, and we've had different shapes of government. We've gone from a Labour government to coalition to a Tory government, and there's been lots of changes going on. I think what that's ended up with is a system which is quite heavily centralised. And central government thinking that they can pull the levers, but actually in a dynamic labour market, really what you need to be able to do is strengthening the connections and the partnerships at a local level. And inadvertently, because we've made changes where we've had productivity problems, we've had problems with finances, and we've cut public funds, that means that we've expected colleges to be doing more with less. And actually a lot of our local infrastructure has become weakened. So some of the things that I'm trying to say is that, you know, let's rebuild that local infrastructure, but let's try to do that in a way that actually really takes note of who is already there. Who are the local partners already there? You know, the risk is that, again, you can come in with a central solution. So government sort of creates this artificial institutional sort of infrastructure, when in actual fact we know that businesses work in networks and businesses are members of trade bodies and professional bodies. You know, we know that they're already working with partners in the local area, including colleges, and what we want to do is amplify those existing relationships and make them stronger.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leslie. We'll hear more from you in a little bit, but over to the other side of the world. And as I said, we're really delighted that Dr. Bin from the Directorate of Vocational Education and Training in Vietnam will be able to join us and give us his perspective on the work that he and the Directorate in Vietnam and the network in Vietnam have been doing around shaping the colleges of the future. So Dr. Bin, over to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we have you now. Thank you very much.
Okay. You know that for the vocational education training is very crucial, and we concentrate so much on this area because this area supplies, 70% of labor force in Vietnam. And so now we have more than I think that 900 schools, both college and intermediate school, with the total number of enrollments about 2 million, more than 2 million people. As you know that the ministry in charge is the Ministry for Labor, Employment and Social Affairs. And like Leslie in Vietnam now, we are facing many problems when the technology changing. You know that the industry revolution 4.0 affects so much every country in the world, and it's changed so fastly. You know that its effect on the labor, we move from the era of agriculture to the services, from the industry and the consumption to the services. And we are risks at many labor will lose by by the robot, like and artificial intelligence, like the area in finance, banking, administration. But some job will be appear in the future, like job related to the creative sectors and logistics, healthcare, and this is some average. But now we estimated that 86% labor in the garment may be in danger of losing job in the future. And the problem for now is the correlation between TVET and industry. It's not very close. TVET maybe it's active very independently, and the linkage is not that close and not effective. And the challenge for us is also the international integration. We have accepted international standard. We are facing with the international level of immigration. Some very high skilled labor from outside will come and work in Vietnam. And on that, we are facing a thinking, what skill for the labor in the future? And you know that for the new technology, for the digital work, the labor not only have a professional skill, they have many other skills like digital skill, like self-study skill, and self-study say that many basic skills have changed in order from 2015 to 2020 and 2030. I know that in the second very important in 2015 is the collaboration, and I think in 2020 is the position in the shift to the fifth. It's like the creative in shift to the third. So it's on we have capacity what college can do in the new situation, and we think that we choose outcome based. It means that we think business and industry in the system. They will set the occupational standard. They set the assessment, and the debate system have to do so that it meets the demands of industry. It's basic. For we think that the college is the future. That we think that the college should be like enterprise. We supply the service, so the college will maybe have friendly customer orientation, make the very quick response capacity to the that's the needs of the industry, the needs of the society. By the way, long trial limit, of course, and the college should become research and development center and have totally, fully autonomy. And for the, in the college, now for new technology, for new digital transformation, the lecture will be the facilitator, virtual lecture, maybe method is not the traditional face by face in the classroom, but we have to thinking to the e-learning, blended learning, and accompanying with that, facility changing. We have to thinking about the virtual facility, simulation, open source, digital, changing material. It means that we have to make the network of the college. And the training program, of course, depends on the needs of the enterprises. Also the management. We think that management lies in the enterprise. As the linkage between the college and enterprise, you know that the college can supply the training course for enterprise, and enterprise can send their labor to the college. It's very flexible, and everything is that we have to use technology in digital world. On running in digital environment and digital transformation. And thinking about that, how do they support the college? Firstly, I think that we are doing like a centralized, but now we have to change. We make the fully autonomous for the college, notifying finance, institution, and activity. So secondly, we try to make encourage to enhance the linkage between the training institution and industry. And thirdly, we will inspect in the factor like teacher facility and use the digital transformation It's usually the digitalization in training session, and the quickly we have to change exchange experience with other European countries. We have to see what UK, what the other country, what's the best practice, and we apply it in the Vietnamese situation. I think that we are facing with many challenges. But we have many chance to reform our system to meet the needs of the changing so rapid world now. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Dr. Bin, and that is a really fascinating look at your approach in Vietnam. And you mentioned about sharing amongst countries. That is, of course, something we're very keen to support at the British Council, and it's fantastic that you could share your perspective with us. I was really struck by your mention of moving towards outcomes-based learning, which is a model many people around the world will recognise, and actually a place where I think TVET and colleges have a story that is useful to apply to other branches of education. It's often been said that TVET has to be for something and justify itself in whether that's in employment or social terms in a way that other types of education maybe don't so much. So as we move and respond to some of the challenges we're facing, I think there are lessons there that colleges can share with universities and other types of education. Thank you very much to those people who have submitted questions. It is very much appreciated, and we now have about half an hour to talk a bit more informally about some of them. I did want to start though, and a number of people have raised this, about the role of employers. And Leslie, I'll come to you first. And I think we wanted to reflect on how important you think it is for colleges to engage employers. And in particular, do they need to do this in a different way now to respond to some of the rapid shocks that we've seen? I'm particularly thinking of the old models of engaging employers may not work where the shape of those employers is going to change so dramatically. If we ask employers now what skills they need, they may not be around in the medium term. So how can colleges manage that, do you think, Leslie?
Okay, I mean, short answer is yes, absolutely. Engagement in employers is fundamental. I think that, and you're right, when you're thinking about a dynamic labour market and you're responding to unforeseen changes that are coming down the track, you can get a sense of them with your forces of change, you know, that slide on the megatrends and where things are headed. But there's a lot we don't know about the future and the precise nature of jobs that are going to exist. So, you know, you've got to sort of modify your relationships with employers to try and capture that. But equally, I think we've got to be really careful about the need to respond to changing agendas on the one hand, but the stability we need in our system in terms of the infrastructure to engage with industry and unlock the basis for a really strong partnership over the long term. And the challenge we've had in the UK, if we've endlessly tinkered with our institutional infrastructure to engage with business, and if you are really going to have a system that is outcome focused in the way that Dr. Bin was outlining, which is really, really key, because that's where you ensure the value of training over time, that it really is, you know, remaining relevant. You know, if you're really going to be able to do that, you've got to put in place the long-term partnerships to unlock co-investment over the long term and to redesign those systems together. Industry's got to have skin in the game, because if they don't, they won't engage, and then they won't be interested in the skills projects that, you know, that are on offer in the colleges. So that's really, really essential. And in other countries, they have infrastructures of sector skills councils, industry bodies, which are often social partnerships, where they're governed by employee representatives as well as employers, are coming together in a social partnership to make sure these things are relevant. We don't have that consistent infrastructure in the UK. So what we're trying to suggest through this vision from the colleges of the future is that we evolve that infrastructure, taking account of what the legacy institutions are at a local level. But we also do need to make sure that our system sort of connects strategically as well, because you can imagine that if you're providing training in a particular sector, you want a certain degree of consistency. You don't want to be duplicating and having lots of different answers to, you know, the solutions for advanced manufacturing or construction. If you want to recruit a builder, you want to make sure the builder has the same skills wherever you are. So there are some of those issues that will have to be kind of strategic in terms of what you agree nationally. And then there are some areas where you allow a degree of customisation to meet specific local requirements. So it's quite a complex answer to that, but hopefully that's kind of clear, and I'm sure it will raise some supplementary questions.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, and one person's tinkering is another person seeking improvement, and it's really hard to manage how much intervention can you make in a system, and I think that's something a number of countries around the world are struggling with. Dr. Bin, I don't know if you wanted to reflect on
Yes.
the ways in which we can engage employers to form these kind of future colleges that we're talking about.
Yes, I really fully agree. It's translated how important of linkage between the TVET institution and industry. But how? You know that in Vietnam, the industry state, it is duty of the government to supply the labor, supply the skill, and said that they very inactive. So we think that we have to make so that win-win competition. It means that the enterprise has benefits, and the government and training institutions also have benefits. How to do that? Firstly, I think we have to set the policy to encourage this thinking. Many in Vietnam now is not enough. We not very strong policy about tax reduce for industries when they invest in training. And so I think the policy have to think. I agree that we have to. There's a long-term cooperation between the training and the price. And we are trying to set up the sector council, skill sector council. And
I think we have just lost you to mute again, Dr. Bin. But while you have a look at that, I think that's really interesting, and the role of sector skills councils is really important, whether it's employer bodies or trailblazer groups or the cantons or business chambers. You know, it really, there are lots of different models for doing that, but I think it's something that Leslie talked about as well. It's about making employers not just the customers of a skills system, but actively engaged in the success of it being their success. And I think that's there's been some really interesting things done around evidence there. You're still on mute, Dr. Bin, so I will move to Leslie while you flick that out. But I just wanted to talk about a little bit more about the role of economic and social improvements and the extent to which colleges can actually drive that, rather than being the kind of implementers alone. How they can innovate and set their own agenda, and is that something they should actually try to do in an effective system, or should we think more about colleges as being implementing partners rather than kind of innovating partners?
I mean, the short answer again is yes, that, you know, I think that we've recognised that the prosperity of global economies isn't just an economic issue, it's a social issue, and that these things are not in competition with each other. They're sort of complementary sides of the same coin. And I think we've realised, just as in terms of managing national systems, that we're not. It's not about prioritising the economy and then thinking about social issues later. They're integrated. And so I think you can move from that kind of national perspective to the contributory role and important role that colleges have. Colleges exist in local communities. They're at the heart of local communities, and they're in urban areas and they're in rural areas. And yes, they first and foremost have a vital sort of agenda around education. But education, is also a vital tool and resource to give people, to empower them to operate effectively in society, and not just in the economy in terms of securing jobs. So I think there's one aspect of it is about how they support that kind of social agenda just through the education piece. But equally, because they're at the heart of the community, and I sort of referenced this with my sort of opening remarks where I talked about, and we call it the 3 Ps. One of my slides was sort of referencing people, which is the education piece, productivity, which is the business piece, because they're at the heart of the community. They can work with employers to basically help employers improve and get the best skilled people and innovate and become productive. But also there's the place element of it. And because they have physical facilities, they can make those facilities on one level available for the community, at all hours of the day and, weekends, that sort of, encourage community activities. Colleges have wider civic responsibilities and civic activities, so they can also contribute to some of those broader programmes, whether it's public health, business support, social inclusion, digital exclusion, a whole host of broader, employment programs. So, for me, that's really integrated into their overall mission, and they absolutely, this is about them having the space to own and push forward these agendas, not to wait for permission.
Brilliant. And Dr. Bin, turning to you, if you can unmute your microphone. You spoke there about the industries that you're looking to develop and the threats to them. How are you helping colleges create those new industries and shape them?
Yes, that in Vietnam we have tried to establish the network colleges for supply scheme for the economy in 2 kinds. One, the last numbers is respond to the current situations scheme for economy. And the second one, we try to establish the high quality colleges. It's when the supply is very, very high skill, high qualification for the future, for the new technology. And now we have about 45 colleges, 45 colleges for this. And I think that like Leslie, that we have to define that clearly, how to invest, and how we can invest to do that. Firstly, we use the budget, state budget, to invest very intensively in the high quality colleges. Secondly, we give the autonomy. We do the colleges. They can have right to cooperate with the enterprises. They have fully right. And of course, we try to develop some colleges, become the research and development center. And the state budget invests so much on facility, building, the people, the management system in this colleges. I think.
Excellent, and I think that's really helpful. I'm struggling to hear you a little bit, so if you maybe speak up a little bit if you can. I just wanted to stick with you though, Dr. Bin, because turning to the questions in the comments, someone has asked what certificates should colleges be offering in the future, and I think that qualifications question is a really interesting one, where we have uncertainty in the jobs of the future and need to provide people with flexibility, but also train them specifically. And I know in your role, you have oversight of this. So I wondered if you could talk a little about the kind of qualifications that you think will be effective in the future.
Yes, you know that it is we are debating on the whole qualification in the future, because it is overlap between the, you know, that university levels at the GS level is we call that the level 5 and level 6. So we try to train the system that we can supply the skill for the many people simultaneously. We try to come to supply scheme for the smaller number, individual orientation. So that we are developing, you know, that e-learning system, open source material, and we try to design the curriculum, training program very diversified. It meets the needs of various people. So this means that we try to give the skill to the smaller number, so that we can colleagues can respond to the new challenges in the future.
Excellent, and I think that's really really key, and the higher level we can get people at qualifications, in theory, the better able those businesses are to develop and thrive. Leslie, I wanted to talk to you about the productivity arm of what you're doing, because that's a really it's a debate that's been going on in the UK for quite some time about our productivity rate. I mean, I think it's sometimes a bit of a challenging one to understand in terms of, you know, there's the actual measure of GDP per worker per hour, but is it that we're talking, how can we allow colleges to support that productivity agenda best, do you think, particularly with retraining being such a key element?
Well, I think, you know, part of the answer just lies in the issue about recognising the value of lifelong learning, you know, and when I was talking about those kind of mega trends earlier and the technological revolution and where the economy is going, and looking globally to understand where developments are going, you know, the potential of technology is it radically changes organisational processes and ways of working, really innovates ways of working, it's smarter working. And, you know, Dr. Min has sort of identified similarly, you know, set out all these new requirements for skills. And, you know, that they don't stand still, they're continually evolving. But the challenge behind the productivity, I mean, productivity is a very complex issue, and I'm not trying to simplify it. And actually, there isn't a consensus about what's behind it, but there are bodies of thought. And one key area is believed to be how businesses invest in their technology, but also their people alongside their technology, to get the best out of their people, so they're utilising technology effectively and keeping up to date with those ongoing digital and technical skills, but also wider skills, which are often called these 21st century skills. So that's a really, you know, key aspect of this, is that you support businesses to innovate. And I think part of the answer of that is that, you know, colleges can have a key role working within these business communities that I referenced earlier. You know, if you're strengthening local infrastructures for delivery, you're creating a climate for collaboration where business networks will work with college networks and actually broader education providers, so it would include higher education as well. And they work through the kind of solutions really in terms of how they evolve their businesses, how and where they use technology, and then what that means for redesigning jobs. So, I mean, it is quite a sort of complex and involved process, but, and it, to be honest, you know, is already happening. But what we want to do is make sure that it's more systematic in how it's happening, because I think at the moment we have these kind of pockets of good practice, But what we want to do is put the spotlight on those and amplify them, and actually, give different players, partners within the system, the sufficient space to make sure that they get the best out of them. So that's sort of part of my answer to that.
Yes.
That's excellent, and I do think as well, I make the mistake often of thinking of colleges as, when I picture one, I see someone who's 16 years of old or 18 going in doing their first post-school qualification, and actually when you actually stand in a college, it's not that kind of institution alone at all. There's huge amounts of adult learning, there's huge amounts of learning for other people, there's huge amounts of different types of learning.
Exactly, and I suppose what I was sort of talking about is, rather than just sort of standardising that model from the centre, government doing it, some officials in DfE, but if you've got college networks coming together, those colleges can start to specialise. They can work to understand what the overall portfolio is, but where they need to specialise. And some of that role, as you're saying, will be contributing to that initial platform of skills, but a lot of it will be building the basis for continuing learning to supplement that. But also, as you say, in later life, you might want to be getting involved in much more community adult education just because it's fun.
Yes,
all those things have a place, and that's important.
Dr. Bin, I wanted to pick up on a point Leslie made there about the learning from what works and rolling that out more widely. How do you in the directorate learn from the good practice that is out there in your colleges and work to kind of spread that to the rest of the network?
Yes, that what we need is not predict the skill in the future. It is not very easy, fast. We are thinking that we have two tasks. That's why on one hand we have to change the new job for the future. The second hand we have to rechange the labor cost. Who now in the work environment, and we try to change from centralized system to decentralized system. The government not so much standard, but the industry and the training institutions have to define, like Leslie have mentioned. And I think the rolling of the college is not changing. The rolling of in enterprise is changing.
Yeah. So
how to make the correlation between them? It's not only the task of the government. I think that's also the task of the enterprises. Even now, as we said, that the enterprises say that it's not my duty. So it's really a problem we are facing. If you not recruit the interest of the enterprise, we fail. Only them know how they need for their job. Yes.
Thank you very much, and I think that role of government as an enabler rather than always being responsible for the outcome is a really important one. And you create the framework for institutions and employers to do what they do better, and I think that's sometimes a hard debate to have. I did just want to quickly and lastly, really, before we go to sort of our general summing up comments, focus on self-employment. I think we've talked about employer engagement here, but and I need to be careful about how I frame this, because there's always been talk about how labour markets are rapidly changing and the jobs of the future aren't going to look like the jobs of the past, and you could have said that at any point in history and that would have been true, and I think we need to be careful not to assume that these challenges are unique to us now. But how can we enable colleges to train people better for self-employment, where rather than these big industries where it's clear that an industry sets a standard, they provide some kit, they provide a work placement, they help train your teachers. How can we enable colleges to do that better for small and medium employers? Dr. Bin, do you want to take that?
You know that in Vietnam, we have strategy to encourage the graduate to make for the own job. You know that we mentioned the startup on the enterprise. I think this applies for the various big, medium, and big enterprises. And we in Vietnam have strategy for that, and the government want to push this process. We come back to the basic scheme. You know that we're changing that. We have to change them to have the scheme for creative. I think that creativeness for the critical thinking and complicated problem solving. For example, so for GBDZ and they have professional skill, they can do by themselves. And we have strategy to promote small enterprise, small and very small enterprise, and it is area for the self-employment for the graduate.
Excellent. I think that changed model of learning and that self-directed model of learning is really important, and actually provides opportunities with the way that learning is changing to be more online and more self-directed. And you know, for policymakers, if you can enable that, you know, it's often quite a cost-effective way of doing it as well. So Leslie, I don't know if you wanted to reflect on that. I mean, maybe or maybe just what do you think is the big change that has never happened before that we're dealing with at the moment that colleges have to respond to? Sorry, that's a massive question for 3 minutes left of a webinar. There you go.
I mean,
do your best.
On one level, I could connect the two, because I do think that this whole issue about the ongoing growth, rapid growth in our economy of micro businesses, and including sole traders and self-employment, has been a trend for a very long period of time. And particularly in the UK, as we endlessly tinker with this institutional infrastructure to engage with industry, which I talked about, you know, we're meeting the needs of those businesses less and less and less, because, you know, they have less resources. They don't have big training departments to sort of, you know, influence the system. They don't have a lot of time to navigate a very complex system. So, you know, endlessly changing our system doesn't really help. So, but I think, you know, I'd come back to some of the things that, you know, I said, you know, at the beginning, that we need to make our mechanisms for engaging with employers more transparent. And, you know, at one level that, you know, starting to reshape provision to make sure it's going to be really valuable and meet industry needs. You know, when you think about somebody who's self-employed, they will be part of communities. You know, they could be a profession, you know, they will work in a particular sector. I do a lot of work with the creative industries. The creative industries is full of freelance workers, but they're in specialist occupations. So you can identify them, you know, and they'll have and that's very industry driven. So a lot of self-employed people in creative industries are driven by the same sort of industry needs as the industry. So that could be one community. They might be in professional communities. They might be connected regionally, because there are networks, local authorities, and, you know, might invest in networks, or you've got British Chamber of Commerce, that's a regional network, you know, they could be engaged in those networks. So I think that's one element of it, is how can you connect to them to still give them influence over a system. There are still ways in which you could do that. And then the other aspect is that, you know, once you're using those mechanisms to make sure that the portfolio of skills and programs that you're offering are really high quality and valuable. So then you've got there's that other awareness piece, because you've got to present that in a really clear way so that they can then navigate it. And I think then some of the things that Dr. Bin sort of talked about at the level below, which is about then, you know, once you've got those portfolio of products right, that you're offering them in a flexible way so that self-employed people can tap into them. Because there's no point, making these things really, really expensive. We've got to find mechanisms to sort of package them in modular ways. They're cost effective, they can be flexible, people can, dial into them and when they've got the space to do so, and so on. So that's probably the dimensions I'd add to that. But I don't know whether that sufficiently deals with the big challenge question, Andy, but I think that's quite challenging since we've never really been able to find a solution to it.
No, that's really helpful, and thanks for your heroic effort at my impossible questions. There, I mean, just as we move towards the end of this, these debates are never going to be able to cover the full complexity of an issue. But I'm really thankful to Dr. Bin and to Leslie for, I think we've got a really good sense of the principles of how we can think about colleges in the future, that they are collaborative, that they are innovative, that the frameworks and the policy environment in which they sit enables them. And I think these are really key things that, we have policymakers, experts from, countries around the world listening to this. And I think that what I'm hearing from both of you is that this is a challenge that will sort of invigorate us in thinking about it. It helps having the focus of the challenge of all these myriad factors that affect how colleges operate is a great opportunity to make them work better for everybody. And I think Dr. Bin and Leslie have both made the point, we should be really careful not to treat colleges as if they don't work at the moment, because they're doing outstanding work. And there is a lot of good things happening. We are just greedy and we want them to work better, and we want the college of the future to be one where everybody wants to go and study there. Employers are knocking on the door trying to get the college to help them out. Policymakers are there trying to learn from all the great things that they're doing. All the staff and the teachers there want to are really passionate about the subject and qualified and have the space to teach as they want to and innovate, but to high quality standards. And so I invite everybody to walk with me to my utopian world that we will achieve one day as we move forward. So thank you very, very much to Dr. Bin and to Leslie, to the Independent Commission of the College of the Future, and to the Directorate of Vocational Education and Training in Vietnam. If you are listening to this and you think I'd like to share this with someone else, well, you can. We will send out a recording. There is also the community itself, which you can sign up to receive updates on these events and research pieces and blogs from people like Leslie and Dr. Bin. If you are thinking, I've got something that I know is the key topic that I really want to talk about, and I've done something brilliant in this space, then get in touch, because we'd love to feature you on one of these events in the new year. So a huge thank you to Galia and to Desi, who've made this event happen. We at the British Council will be doing further work in this space. We're about to commission some research, or we have commissioned some research maybe, working with colleges in Malaysia, India, Ghana and South Africa and the UK, looking at how they are responding to COVID, and we will expect to publish that sometime in the new year. Yeah, we look forward to continuing the debate with you all and to learning from you and the processes that are happening around the world. So thank you very, very much to everybody who's participated, and we will see you again very soon in the new year. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.